Rain poured relentlessly as a barefoot girl huddled under a broken streetlight, her tattered book shielded by a piece of nylon. Beside her, a little girl in a soaked designer jacket sat cross-legged, listening with wide-eyed wonder as the homeless girl traced letters in the mud, teaching her to read. From across the street, a man in a sleek black car watched in silence, a billionaire whose fortune could buy the entire block, yet whose daughter now found warmth in the company of someone who had nothing. His hand trembled on the steering wheel, his eyes dark with something deeper than surprise. But what he did next would change everything. Who was this girl who had reached where money never could, and what decision was he about to make that no one saw coming? The city never slept, but for Maya Green every night felt longer than the last. The streets of downtown Chicago were cold and cruel, yet under the cracked streetlight on Fifth Avenue, she found her small island of peace, a spot she'd claimed with a few old blankets and a stack of second-hand books salvaged from a trash bin behind a closed library. Maya wasn't always homeless. Once she'd been a bright student with dreams of teaching children how words could change lives. But when her mother died and her father vanished with grief and debt, the world folded in on her. She learned to survive not by stealing, not by begging, but by holding on to the one thing no one could take: knowledge. Every night she read aloud to herself, her soft voice rising between thunderclaps, as if teaching invisible students in the dark. That night, as lightning cracked above, a tiny voice startled her. "Are you a teacher?" Maya turned and saw a little girl no older than 8. Her pink jacket drenched, her shoes caked with mud. Her golden curls stuck to her cheeks as she hugged a stuffed bear tight. Maya blinked. "You shouldn't be out here," she said gently. "Where's your mom or dad?" The girl sniffled. "Daddy's in the car, he's..." Mad. Her gaze dropped. "I ran away. I didn't want to go to that fancy school anymore." Maya frowned, then smiled faintly, pointing to the letters she'd been drawing in the mud. "You ran away to learn letters in the rain?" The little girl giggled through her tears. "Maybe. What's your name?" Maya asked. "Sophie." "Sophie Adams." Maya's hand froze midair. The name felt familiar, but she brushed it aside. "Well, Sophie Adams," she said softly, "since you're here, let's make the rain count." She picked up a stick and began tracing again. "This one's an A, like in your name. See how it stands tall and strong? It's the beginning of everything." Sophie mimicked her, her small fingers shaky but eager. "A," she whispered, smiling proudly. Across the street, through a fogged car window, Ethan Adams, CEO of Adams Global Enterprises, watched in stunned silence. His daughter, the heir to everything he'd built, was sitting in the mud learning letters from a homeless girl. His world of penthouses and boardrooms felt suddenly small, even meaningless. He'd brought Sophie downtown after another argument with her tutor, hoping to talk, but she'd stormed out before he could say a word. Now, as he watched Maya teaching under the rain, something stirred inside him. Guilt, maybe awe, he couldn't tell. When Maya looked up and met his gaze for a fleeting second, he saw something he hadn't seen in years: compassion without condition. He started the car, his mind spinning. Who was she? And why did his daughter look happier in the dirt than she ever did in his mansion? Ethan Adams had negotiated billion-dollar deals without flinching, stared down ruthless competitors without blinking. Yet that night, he couldn't find the courage to step out of his own car. Through the windshield, he saw Maya kneeling beside Sophie, her clothes soaked, her fingers trembling as she wrote in the mud. But there was something in the way she spoke, steady, kind, and patient, that drew him in. Every few seconds, Sophie would laugh, clapping her tiny hands, and Maya would smile, that warm, weary smile that looked both fragile and powerful all at once. He finally opened the door. The rain hit him like cold needles, but he didn't care. The sound of his expensive shoes splashing in puddles startled both girls. Sophie gasped, clutching her bear tighter. "Daddy!" Ethan exhaled, trying to control his emotions. "Sophie, get in the car. You're going to catch pneumonia out here." Sophie shook her head stubbornly. "I don't want to. Maya's teaching me." Ethan turned his gaze to the young woman beside her. Up close, Maya looked even younger than he'd thought. Maybe 21, with dark eyes that carried exhaustion far beyond her years. Her hands were ink-stained and a faint scar traced her jawline. Despite the dirt and rain, she carried herself with quiet dignity. "I'm sorry, sir," Maya said quickly, standing and wrapping her thin coat tighter. "I didn't mean any harm. Your daughter just asked questions." Ethan's tone softened despite himself. You know who I am? Maya shrugged. No, but I can tell she's cared for. Not every kid has a jacket that costs more than my rent used to. He almost smiled, but the sting of guilt stopped him. You shouldn't be out here alone. It's dangerous, her eyes met his. It's not danger that scares me, Mr. Adams, it's being invisible. That line hit harder than he expected. For a moment, the sounds of rain and traffic disappeared. All he saw was a girl who had lost everything yet still gave warmth to a child she didn't know. He took off his jacket and held it out. At least take this, she shook her head. You'll get cold, he looked at her, surprised. I have a car, a home, a company. I'll survive. And I have pride, she said softly. I'll survive too. Something in her voice, not defiance but grace, stopped him from insisting. Instead, he glanced down at Sophie, who was now staring up at both of them like she was watching a movie unfold. Daddy, Sophie said suddenly, can Maya come with us? Just for dinner? The question froze him. The idea was absurd. A homeless girl in his mansion? The tabloids would feast on that. But when he looked into Sophie's hopeful eyes, and then back at Maya's steady, uncertain expression, something inside him shifted. He didn't know why, but he heard himself say, just for tonight? Maya hesitated, searching his face for any hint of mockery or pity. There was none, only sincerity and confusion tangled together. All right, she whispered. And as they walked toward the black sedan, the billionaire couldn't shake the feeling that his life, carefully built, perfectly controlled, had just been rewritten by a girl who had nothing but heart. The mansion loomed like a quiet cathedral of glass and marble when they arrived. Every step Maya took echoed against the polished floors, making her painfully aware of the mud on her shoes. She clutched her old satchel close, her eyes darting from the grand chandelier above to the endless staircase that spiraled like something from a dream she wasn't meant to have. Sophie tugged her hand with innocent excitement. You can sit next to me. We always eat in the big dining room when Daddy's home. Ethan walked ahead silently, his mind caught between logic and emotion. Bringing a homeless girl home wasn't just impulsive, it was reckless. Yet every time he looked at Maya, he saw something he hadn't seen in anyone from his circle. Humility that carried power, not weakness. The butler, Mr. Reynolds, stiffened when they entered. Sir, shall I prepare an extra setting? Ethan nodded curtly. Yes, for our guest. Maya froze. Guest. The word felt foreign, like a borrowed coat too large for her shoulders. She wanted to vanish, but Sophie's smile anchored her. Dinner was quiet at first. The table stretched so far that Maya felt small just sitting at it. She tried to eat slowly, but her hand shook slightly as she held the silver fork. It felt heavier than it should have. Across from her, Ethan pretended to check emails but kept stealing glances. Every gesture of hers, the careful way she chewed, the grateful smile she offered when Sophie passed the bread, spoke volumes about her upbringing. This was not someone born on the streets. Something had happened. Something painful. So, Ethan said finally, setting down his phone, you teach kids on the street often? Maya smiled faintly. Not often. Just whoever's willing to learn. Most people walk past. And why do you do it? She looked down at her plate, then up at him. Because once someone taught me when I had nothing. I guess I'm just passing it on. Her voice carried no bitterness, only quiet strength. Ethan leaned back, studying her. Sophie was grinning, drawing letters on her napkin with a butter knife. Maya taught me how to write A's, she said proudly. Ethan chuckled. I saw that. Maya's smile widened but then faded when she caught a glimpse of herself in the reflection of the glass wall. Drenched hair, worn-out clothes, mismatched shoes. She didn't belong here. She stood abruptly. I should go. You've been kind enough already. Ethan frowned. You can stay until the rain stops. It's not the rain I'm worried about, she said softly. It's waking up and thinking this was real. Before he could respond, Sophie ran around the table and hugged Maya's waist tightly. You are real. And you're coming back tomorrow. Promise? Maya knelt down, brushing the child's damp curls back. I promise, she whispered. As she left that night, the sound of the closing door echoed louder than thunder. Ethan watched from the window, his chest tightening. He had everything the world envied, yet somehow, that girl had made him feel like the one missing something. And for the first time in years, he couldn't stop asking himself, what kind of life had he really built? The morning sunlight sliced through the tall glass windows of the Adams estate, falling over the sleek furniture like liquid gold. Ethan sat in his home office staring at his laptop, but the numbers, charts, and contracts blurred into meaningless lines. His thoughts were elsewhere. On a barefoot girl under a streetlight he hadn't slept much. Every time he closed his eyes he saw Maya's face. The calm defiance in her eyes, the humility in her voice. The way Sophie clung to her as if she'd found a missing piece of herself. Ethan was used to controlling every variable in his life. But this girl, this mystery, had completely disrupted his sense of control. He opened a browser and typed her name into the search bar. Maya Green. To his surprise, results appeared. An article from 3 years ago. Young education student wins citywide literacy award. The photo showed her smiling beside a mayor holding a certificate. The caption read, University of Chicago senior Maya Green, recognized for her work teaching underprivileged children. Ethan leaned back slowly. She was a teacher in training? He muttered. What happened to her? Another click. Another article. Car accident claims local family. Father missing, daughter in recovery. The picture was blurry, but he recognized her instantly. Same eyes, same scar along her jawline. The report said her father disappeared after a failed business deal, leaving her with hospital debt that swallowed her future whole. Ethan's chest tightened. He knew that feeling, the desperation of losing everything. Only for him wealth had been a shield. For her it had been a wall that crushed her. Just then Sophie burst through the office door, her blonde curls bouncing. Daddy, can we go see Maya again today? You said she could come back. Ethan blinked, forcing a smile. You really like her, don't you? Sophie nodded. She listens to me. Not like the tutors who talk too much. She said I'm smart, just not in the same way everyone wants me to be. Those words hit him harder than he expected. How many times had he told Sophie to be better, focus more, try harder, when all she really needed was someone to see her? He closed his laptop and stood. All right, let's go find her. The streets downtown were calmer in daylight, but when they reached the spot under the streetlight, Maya was gone. Only her old blanket and a single water-warped book remained. Ethan picked it up carefully. The Giving Tree, a child's classic. Inside the cover, written in faded ink, was a line that read, To Maya, may you always give without losing yourself. He felt a lump rise in his throat. Sophie tugged his sleeve. Daddy, what if she's hurt? Before he could answer, a voice came from behind them, soft, familiar, but trembling. I didn't think you'd come back. Ethan turned. There she was. Same fragile coat, same tired eyes. But this time, a bruise darkened her cheek. She tried to smile, but it faltered. What happened? Ethan asked, stepping forward. It's nothing, Maya said quickly. Just someone reminding me where I belong. Ethan's jaw tightened. Not anymore, he said quietly. For the first time, Maya saw something in his eyes that wasn't pity. It was promise. For a long moment, no one spoke. The hum of the city seemed to fade beneath the tension between them. Ethan's eyes were fixed on the bruise along Maya's cheek, faint but undeniable. The protective instinct he'd buried beneath years of business armor began to rise again. Maya, he said, his voice low but steady. Who did this? She shook her head quickly. Please don't, it doesn't matter, I just said no to someone who didn't like hearing it. Ethan's fists tightened. You shouldn't be out here alone. I've been alone for years, Mr. Adams, she replied softly. It's not as scary as you think. People look right through me. That's safer than being seen sometimes. He took a deep breath, fighting the frustration that boiled in his chest. You're not invisible anymore. Maya met his eyes. Suspicious, curious, maybe even a little afraid. What does that mean? It means, he said firmly, you're coming with us. I'm offering you a position, a real one. Be Sophie's tutor, full-time. Her brows furrowed and she laughed faintly, the sound brittle as glass. A tutor, me? I don't even have a home, let alone credentials anymore. I saw the articles, Ethan said. You were at the University of Chicago. You won a literacy award. You didn't lose your mind or your gift, Maya, just your chance. Let me give it back. For a second, her mask of strength cracked. Why would you do that? You don't even know me. He paused, glancing down at Sophie, who stood clutching Maya's hand again. Because my daughter smiled yesterday and really smiled, for the first time in months, and because sometimes the people with the least have the most to teach. Maya stared at him, caught between disbelief and gratitude. If I say yes, she whispered, I want to earn it. Not as charity. Ethan nodded slowly. Good, because I don't do charity. I invest in people who matter. The rain began again, gentle this time, washing the grime from the sidewalk. Maya looked up at the sky, then back at him. All right, she said finally, her voice barely audible. I'll try. Later that evening, she walked through the Adams mansion once more, this time not as a guest, but as someone with a purpose. Sophie ran ahead, showing her every corner of the house, the piano room, the garden, the massive library that made Maya's eyes light up like a child's. Ethan watched from the doorway, a faint smile tugging at his lips. Something in the air had shifted, softer, more alive. He didn't know it yet, but this decision, one born from instinct and compassion, would ripple far beyond his home. For in giving Maya a second chance, he'd unknowingly opened the door to his own redemption. Weeks turned into months, and what began as an act of compassion grew into something far deeper. The Adams mansion, once echoing with silence and tension, now pulsed with laughter, music, and life. Maya had become more than Sophie's tutor. She'd become her friend, her confidant, and somehow, the missing warmth the house had always needed. Every morning, Sophie would rush downstairs with her books, eager to learn, eager to tell Maya about her dreams. Ethan would often pause by the study door, watching as Maya guided Sophie's hand over words, patient and kind. It amazed him how much she could teach without ever raising her voice. He'd built empires with money and power, yet this woman, with nothing but faith and gentleness, was rebuilding his home. One night, as winter snow fell softly outside, Ethan found Maya in the library, standing before a roaring fire. She was reading aloud, not to Sophie this time, but to herself. Her voice filled the room with quiet strength. He lingered by the doorway. You've changed this house, Maya, he said. She looked up, startled but smiling. I didn't do much. I just reminded Sophie she's enough. And you reminded me, he said, stepping closer, that money doesn't make people happy. People do. Her smile faltered slightly. Then maybe I did something right. They stood in silence, the fire crackling between them. For the first time, Ethan wanted to ask what she truly wanted from life. Not as a teacher, not as someone he helped, but as a woman whose courage humbled him. Maya, he began carefully, I want to sponsor you. Finish your degree, go back to teaching. The world needs more people like you. She stared at him, eyes glistening. Ethan, I can't take that. You've done enough. This isn't pity, he said. It's respect. You've done for my daughter what I couldn't. You've shown her love without condition. That's worth more than any deal I've ever made. Tears slipped down her cheek as she nodded slowly. Then I'll do it. Not for me, but for Sophie. So she sees that kindness can rebuild lives. Months later, the world learned of Maya Green, not the homeless girl, but the teacher who had once lived on the streets and was now running a foundation for underprivileged children, fully funded by Adams Global. At the press conference, Ethan stood quietly in the background as Maya spoke to the cameras, her voice steady. A man once gave me a second chance when I thought I'd lost everything, she said. But the truth is he didn't save me, his daughter did. Because love in its purest form doesn't see status, it just sees humanity. Reporters turned to catch Ethan's expression, but he only smiled and humble, proud, changed. Outside, Sophie ran into Maya's arms, clutching a handmade card that read, "Thank you for teaching my heart to read." And as cameras flashed and snow drifted softly around them, the billionaire finally understood. Sometimes, the greatest investment a man can make isn't in gold or property, but in people who remind him what it means to feel.